Welcome everybody. So in this video, we are going to redesign 3 UI components from the Tailwind UI library. Now, just to mention here, the purpose of this video is to teach us how to design by redesigning great designs pixel for pixel. Now, before we jump into Figma to start designing, let's talk about the Tailwind UI library. So the Tailwind UI library is a collection of already made UI components that you can just use in your web development project without you having to build from scratch. Basically, it's a bank of over 500 responsive and modern UI components that's already been built. All you have to do is just use them whenever you have a web development project. Now, to see all of the Tailwind UI components, just come here to their website, which is www.tailwindui.com. When you get here, click on the Browse Component button here, and you'll be able to see all the components in this library. And that's that. So in this video today, we will be redesigning these 3 components from the Tailwind UI library, and at the end of it all, we will merge these 3 components to create a dashboard user interface. So let's look at these 3 components individually. So this is the first component that we are going to redesign. Now, in this component, what we are going to redesign only is just going to be the sidebar. That's all we are going to redesign here. Now, for the second component here, we are going to redesign everything that you can see here, apart from this text here that says with hidden headings and this text here that says get the code. Now, for this component here, for the third component, we are going to redesign everything that you can see here, apart from this text that says with brand icon and this text that says get the code. Now, the link to these components will be in the description of this video. Also, the link to this Figma file will be in the description of this video. Now, as you can see, right, in my Figma file, I already have all the icons, all the color styles, and all the text styles that will be used in the redesigning of these components. So let's go straight to business and let's start by redesigning this sidebar. Bring this here. And the first element I would want us to create in this sidebar would be the brand logo. Now, in my own case, I don't have a brand logo, but if you have one, that's very cool. What I have here is just a text that says brand logo. I would bring that in, and that is going to serve as my own brand logo. Now, after that, the next element or the next group of elements I would want us to recreate here are the menu items that you can see here. And by menu items, I mean dashboard, theme, projects, calendar, documents, and report. I would want us to create these items next. So how do we do that? Let's come here. Let's create the text that says dashboard. Now, after creating that text, I would keep it selected, and I would use one of my text styles, which is the medium body text style. I would use that. Take note, I am zoomed in currently at 200%. So I would use that text style on this text, still keep the text selected, put it in an auto layout, and I'll take out all the padding space in that auto layout, right? Because it's not yet time for us to start allocating padding spaces. And you can rename the auto layout to menu text AL, menu text auto layout. Select the text in the auto layout and change the color of that text. I would use a color style. In my style library, you can go ahead to use whatever you like to use, right? I would go to my style library and I would pick my color style, which is primary text color. That's fine. Now I would bring in an icon that I would use here. I would go to my asset library and I would use this icon here. I'll bring in the icon, keep it beside the dashboard text auto layout, select the both of them, put the both of them inside one auto layout, right? Then I would rename that auto layout to menu list item. And after that, I would set the space between the items in that auto layout to 12. And after setting the space between the items in that auto layout to 12, I would come here and I would set the horizontal padding of that auto layout or in that auto layout to 8. And I'll set the vertical padding to 16. And there we have that. Now make sure that the alignment of the items in this auto layout is to the left horizontally and to the center vertically, just as I have done mine right now, yeah? And after that, I'll just give this auto layout a background color for now. Let's make the background color to be F8. And there I have it. This is okay. But as you can see, there is no clear difference between the background of my auto layout and the background of my canvas. So let's darken the background of my canvas slightly so we can have that clear contrast between the background of my component and the background of my canvas, just like this. So I would come here, I would keep the icon selected also in the auto layout here, and I would change the color of the icon to the color of the text. And that's good. And I would make it a component. When I make it a component, I would set some component properties on it that I can use to swap the icon and also edit the text content. So I would keep the component selected now. Come here, go to the properties subsection in the properties panel, and I would add an instant swap property that will be used to swap the icon. So I would call that icon swap, and I would pick an instance for the value property. I would come here, I would pick that, and I would click on create property. Then I would add another property that will be used to edit the text content here. Keep the component selected still, come here, click on the plus sign in front of properties, then click on text. And I would rename this property to menu item text. Then for the value, I would just have dashboard written in there. And I would click on the create property, and there I have that. Now, after I do that, I would come here and I would select the icon inside the component and I would attach it to its component property. I would select the icon, come here, click there, and I would select icon swap, select the text. When I select the text element, come here and I would attach it to the menu item text property. And that's all. Now, after that, I would keep the component selected still and I would add a variant. I would keep the component variant box selected. And I'll just set property 1 to name, select the first variant and call that default menu list item. I would select the second variant. I'll change the name to hovered menu list item. And of course, the reason why I have these variants created is so that I can have a hovered version of this component. So I would keep this variant, the new variant selected, come here and I'll change its background color to pure white. So when I change that to white, I would come here, click on the prototype tab, and I would set the interaction. So I would click on this default list item, and I would create my connection, and I would say while hovering, while a user hovers on this, the component or this variant rather should change to this variant. Quite simple, yeah? And just to make sure this comes out the way I want it to come out, I would keep this variant selected, this particular variant. I would set its corner radius to 8. Keep this also, set its corner radius to 8, and I think that's fine. Now let's bring different instances, or let's bring multiple instances of this component so we can then create all of this. Let's see how many instances we have to bring in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'll bring in 6 instances. And of course, all we just have to do is swap the icons and change the text content. The first instance is okay. The second instance would be used for theme. So I would first of all swap the icon to the theme icon, which is this. Change the text content to theme. The next is project. So I would swap that, keep that selected, change the text content to project. And the next is calendar. Come here. Change that to calendar, swap the icon to that. The next is document, keep this selected, change the text content to document and swap the icon also to this, and keep that other instance selected and change the text content to report, then swap the icon to this. Now I would want us to change the colors of these icons to the exact same color style we used for the text. So I would come here, primary text color, primary text color, primary text color, and finally select that and set that to primary text color. Now all we have to do is just merge all of them into one auto layout, right? Easy. And take out the space between all of them in that auto layout. And we have this. Now we need to ensure that these containers or these list items are responsive in their auto layout. So I would select each of them, then I would set their horizontal resizing to fill container, just so that when I stretch the parent container, all the list items will also respond accordingly, just like this. Now looking at the sidebar, we need to create this section here that says your themes. Now we can just go ahead and create that. Let's create a text that says your themes, and text style I'll be using for that. Let's use the regular body but semi-bold. Yeah, I'll be using that, the body semi-bold text. I'll put that text inside an auto layout also. Take out the padding on all sides and set that to 0. Keep the text selected and set its own color to the primary text color style. That's very okay. Keep that there. And it will be time for us to create these items here. Now, as you can see, these items have this little badge beside them, right? Now, this is not an icon. I would want us to create this element, H, T, and W. I would want us to create them ourselves. I'll be using a regular frame that is 36 by 36 to create that. Just like that. I would create that frame and I would set the corner radius of that frame to 8. Give that frame a stroke. And for the stroke color, I'll be making use of my outline color here. And after that, I'll just create the text, which is H. And I'll take that text into this regular layout. Now let's keep that text selected. Now let's change the text style for this text to medium body text. Right, let's bring it into this layout and make sure the text is aligned to the absolute center of the layout. So I would use the alignment properties here at the top. I would align this to the horizontal center, align that to the vertical center, and that's very perfect. I would keep this here and I would create the text that's staying beside it. I think that's hero icons. We have hero icons, Tailwind Labs, and Workation. So I would keep that there. Put this text inside its own auto layout. Set all the padding on all sides to 0, and finally merge these two into one auto layout and set the space between them to 12, which is the exact same space I have between the items here. It's 12, right? So I want to keep that consistent throughout the sidebar. So I would set the space between this and this also to 12. Now I would keep this auto layout selected now, and I would set the horizontal padding right to 12. Now let's look at the horizontal padding here. Okay, the horizontal padding here is set to 8. I would want us to set this also to 8. So I'll keep this selected, set the horizontal padding to 8. That's fine. And I would set the vertical padding of that to 16. I would come here and I would give this a fill color. And I would make sure that the color is F8, just like this. I would select this container also and I would set the background color to F8, just like this. And that's fine. I would keep this here and I'll duplicate this to have the others. Now I would set this to T, keep the T text selected, make sure it is aligned to the absolute center also. Change the text content to Tailwind Labs, I believe, Tailwind Labs. Let's confirm that. And the other is Workation, right? So Tailwind Labs and Workation. So T and this would be W. Keep the W text selected, make sure it's aligned to the absolute center of that layout. I would say Workation. That's fine. Now the next thing to do is to merge the 3 items into one auto layout. Set the space between them to 0, and there we have that. Now after that, make sure you select each of them and set their horizontal resizing to fill container so that they can be responsive, just like this. Now after we do that, select your team's text and that auto layout now. Select all of them, put them in one auto layout, right? And set the space between the items in this auto layout to 4. And after that, if you zoom in, you would see that your team's text is not aligned to the left of these other items, right? There is this padding space here on the left, and there is no padding space there before the letter Y. So since your team's text is inside an auto layout, I would select the auto layout that your team's text is in, and I would set a horizontal padding here of 8. Now you can see we have a consistent space on the left, and that's fine. So I would keep the main auto layout now selected, which contains everything. Set a fill color, change the fill color from absolute white to F8, and there we have that. Very okay. So let's rename this to menu list items, and maybe we can just call this your themes. That's okay. Now, what other part of this sidebar have we not created? We have not created this settings item here. So let's just create that. So to create that is going to be very easy. I'll just bring in the menu list item, change the text content to settings, and swap the icon with the settings icon, which is this. That's fine. Now let's change the color of the settings icon to the primary text color. And there we have that. Now you can see we have this. So we are ready to merge everything. Now to start merging, of course, I would want us to start with these two items. So I would come here. I would merge both of them into one auto layout. When I merge them into one auto layout, I would select each of them in the auto layout and I would set their horizontal resizing to fill container. And these items inside this original auto layout are acting up. They all went back to having a fixed width value in the horizontal resizing. So I would reselect all of them and set their horizontal resizing to fill container just to ensure that we don't have any issues. So I would come here now and I would select this auto layout, give it a white background color, then change the white background color to F8. And I would want to create some space between this subsection and this subsection inside this auto layout. So I would keep the auto layout selected and I would set that space to 40px, just like this, which is fair, right? Now after that, the next thing to do is to merge the logo with this. So I'll bring the logo and I'll merge the logo with that, put them inside one auto layout. Select this section of the auto layout now, set the horizontal resizing to fill container. Now don't worry about this. This is something that keeps happening. You can just select this that is bulging out and set the horizontal resizing to fill container, and that's going to be sorted. That's no problem. Select this, resize this, and as you can see, everything is working just fine. Now I would come here and I would set the fill container to white, change this back to F8. Finally, it will be time for me to merge this, right? Now when I come here, I would select all of this, merge them into one auto layout. Then select this in the auto layout, set this to fill container, select the settings item, set that to fill container also. This is not a problem, just select the main auto layout and stretch. Now all we just have to do to make this sidebar perfect is to come here, keep the sidebar selected, set the horizontal padding of the sidebar to 12 and give the sidebar a vertical padding of 24. So I would add a white background color and change that to F8 also. And here we have this. Now for the space between the items in the sidebar, the space between this and the settings list item, that space is going to be automatically set. It's going to be a space between value. It's going to be auto, right? So I would select the sidebar, come here and set the space to auto. So let's increase the height to see what we have. You can see that space is automatic and it's cool that way, right? So I would come here, I would rename the component to sidebar. When I rename it to sidebar, I would make it a component. When I make it a component, I would go ahead to test the component so we can see what we have been doing so far. So I would bring in a desktop layout. Let's bring in a MacBook Air layout, right? Let's just test this quickly. So I would add a layout grid and set the count of the column grid to 12. I'll just change the color to something dark and I'll set the gutter to 16. Now take note, my margin property is set to 0. Now I would go to the assets library, bring in the sidebar, and I would use 3 columns for the sidebar. And I'll preview this. Let's see what we have. And okay, this looks okay. Now there is just one thing I would love us to change about the design. That's the color of hero icons, Tailwind labs, and workation. I would like us to change the colors of these text, right, to be consistent with the colors of the text we have here. So let's go ahead and let's do that. Let's go to the parent component, select these, and let's go to the selection colors, change that to primary text color, and that's sorted. So we are good to go for that component. Now I would want us to go ahead to create the next component. Now the next component to create is this component, right? Let's create this component here. So first things first, let's create this text that says recent activity. So I would come here, I would say recent activity, right? Keep that selected and I would use the heading text style for that. Keep the text selected still and set the color of that text to primary text color. Now after that, I would keep that text inside an auto layout and I can rename the auto layout to recent text, right? For now, keep the space in that auto layout set to 0 for now, right? After that, I would want us to create this text that says today. So we can just come here, duplicate this, right, to have that text that says today. And we can change the name of the auto layout to today text. And what do we have to create next? Now, I would like us to create this section here that displays the amount of money that's paid, right? So I would come here, I would still copy this text, and I'll change the content to 700. Now that's the amount. Now I would want us to just ensure that we don't stick to the exact same text styles that we used on recent activity, because we are just duplicating from recent activity. We duplicated from here to create this, and we duplicated from this to create this. So I want us to be very, very conscious of the text styles that we use on our text element. So I would keep this text selected. I would rename that to amount, and I'll change the text style to big body text, not just heading text. And for this text here that says today, I'd also want to change the text style to big body text. So let's come here. Now we have created the amount. I would want us to create the currency unit, which is USD. So let's duplicate this text. Let's change this content to USD. So you can rename the auto layout to currency units. What do we need to create next? We need to create this text that says $500 and tax. So I would come here. I'll change, let's see how it's written, 500, okay, $sign. And I would want us to change the text style for that so we can have a clear visual hierarchy between this and this. I would come here, I would use regular body text for that. And for the text color, I'll change the text color from primary text color to secondary text color. And after that, I'll duplicate this and I'll change this to just tax. So I'm having all the elements that I need. I have this section created. All I need to create next is just the badge that says paid and this icon. Let's go ahead and let's create that badge that says paid. Now this text that says paid, right? I would like that text to use the text style, which is the regular body text semi-bold. And I would put that text in an auto layout. I would set the horizontal padding to 12, set the vertical padding to 4, and I would give it a fill color. The fill color is going to be one of my colors, I think my green container color. And for the text, which is paid, I'll change the color of that text also to on green container. Keep the green container selected. Give it a corner radius of 8, and I'll give it a stroke color. The stroke color would be the green outline color style, just like that. So after this, I would start merging all the elements together. So I would merge these two first, set the space between them to 8. Make sure the items in that auto layout are aligned to the center vertically and to the left horizontally. After that, bring this here, merge all of this into one auto layout. Make sure the space between the two items in this auto layout is also set to, let's say, 16. After that, make sure that the items in this auto layout are aligned to the center vertically and to the left horizontally, just like this. Now let's merge these two at the bottom into one auto layout. Make sure that the elements also are aligned to the center vertically and to the left horizontally, like I have just done mine now. And I'll keep the space between the two items in that auto layout to 8, and that's okay. Now what I'll do next is to merge all of this into one auto layout. I'll keep the space between the items in the auto layout. I'll keep the space between them to 8, and that's fine. Now after this, I would want us to bring in that icon, which is this arrow icon here. I would want us to bring that in, and I think we have that. Okay, this is it here. Let's bring in this icon. Take note, my icon is a 24 by 24 px icon. I would keep the icon selected and I'll change its color to icon color. Keep all of them inside one auto layout now, and set the space between the items in that auto layout to 32. Make sure that that auto layout is a top left aligned auto layout so that the icon can be aligned to the top left, just like this. I can just come here and then keep the background color set to white so I can see this clearly. Now I'm not going to have any padding set on this, right? I can just call this cache record, and that's fine. Now looking at this component, or looking at what we have to design here, I have designed this, I have designed this, and I have just designed this part in this row, right? The next thing is to design this text that says reform and website redesign. Then I'll design this. So let's create a reform, right? Let's duplicate this text and use that to create a reform. You can rename the auto layout to reform AL or whatever you want to call that. And I'll keep the reform text selected. and I'll make sure that the text style is set to big body text, which is what I want. Then there is another text right under reform, which is, I think, website redesign. Let's come here, let's duplicate the reform text and use that for website redesign. Now keep the website redesign text selected and change the text style to regular body text. And don't forget to change the color of this text to the secondary text color so that we can have that visual hierarchy between this and this. And that's fine. Now I would put both of them inside one auto layout, and I would set the space between them to 8, right? It has to be consistent as the space between this line and this line in this auto layout. So I'll keep that there. I can rename this auto layout to reform record or whatever you want to call that. Keep it selected. Give it a white background color so we can see it clearly. Now we have to create this part here that says view transaction with an invoice number. So I would come here. Let's duplicate this also. Let's use that to create view transaction. And after that, I would keep the view transaction text selected, and I would make sure it is making use of the big body text style, which is the text style that I want this text to make use of. And one thing to do is to change the color of that text to blue. Now, the next thing to do is to bring in a duplicate of this. So I can use this to create that invoice number. Now keep that selected and make sure that the text style is set to regular body text, and make sure the color style is set to secondary text color for the sake of visual hierarchy. Now keep the both of them selected, put them in an auto layout, and set the space between the both of them to 8. Now after I do that, I would come here and I would ensure that we do something that is being captured here. Now, as you can see here, in this particular section of the design, the text elements are aligned to the right. So I would come here, I would select this auto layout, and I would make sure every item in that auto layout is aligned to the right. Now you can see invoice is aligned to the right, and I would put a white background color there. Now it's time for us to start merging. So for us to merge this effectively, I would want us to start by merging from the right to the left, right? I would want us to merge these two elements first, merge the both of them, and make sure that the both of them are staying inside an auto layout that is aligned to the center vertically and to the left horizontally for now, right? Then I would add a fill color, which is going to be a white background color. And one thing I would want to do here is to ensure that the space between these two items in the auto layout is automatic. So I would keep the auto layout selected, and I would set the space between to auto, just like this. And that's fine. Now after this, I would come here, take this, merge all of these in one auto layout now. And I would also come here and make sure that the alignment is to the left horizontally and to the center vertically. And I would add a white background color. Then finally make sure that the space between this and these in the auto layout is automatic. So I would select the auto layout, set the space between to auto, just like that. And as you can see, we have this. Now I would keep these auto layouts selected. I would set the padding horizontally to 32, and I would set the padding vertically to 24. And here I have this. Now, what do we create next? I would want us to make sure that the today section and the recent activity section is sorted. Remember, these two text elements, right? Today and recent activity, the both of them are inside their auto layout. I would keep the auto layout of today text selected, and I would set the horizontal and vertical padding for that auto layout. So the horizontal padding is also going to be 32, and I would set the vertical padding to 16. Then I would give it a background color. The background color is going to be background color, just like this. And when I increase the width of this auto layout, you see the today text is always staying at the center. That's because the alignment is to the center of the auto layout. I would set the alignment to the top left, and that's okay. And there we have this. So let's stretch this to this point, and let's bring in recent activity. Let's also design that. Now, recent activity is inside its own auto layout. Remember that the text recent activity is also inside its own auto layout. So I would keep that auto layout selected. I would set the vertical or the horizontal padding rather to 32, and I'll set the vertical padding to 40 at the top and 24 at the bottom, just like this. Then I would set a white background color. And when I increase the width, you can see the recent activity text is always sticking to the center of the auto layout. To fix that, to make this text go to the left, I would come here and I would align that to the left. And here I have this. Now what I would want us to do next is to duplicate this into 3 places. Let's just duplicate this. And I would want us to maybe change the text content. Let's set this to 10,000 USD. Okay, there is no tax here. And just take auto layout that contains the tax out, and that's fine. Now for the paid text that says withdraw, right? Keep the auto layout that says withdraw selected and change its background color to, let's change this to background color. Then change the text color from on green container to, let's say, secondary text color, like this. I think that's okay. And one more thing, we need to change the stroke color from green outline to dark outline. That's fine. After that, let's change the text that says reform and website redesign to Tom Cook and salary. I'll change this to Tom Cook, then change this to salary. And finally, I would want us to set this to 2,000 USD. Keep this set to overdue, right? And this is red. So I would select that container, change the color style to red container, change the color of the text to unread container, then change the stroke color of that container from green outline to red outline. So I can change the text also to tuple and logo design there. So I can come here, I would say tuple, and I would say logo design. Now let's merge the 3 of them into one auto layout and set the space between them in that auto layout to 0, right? And make sure that you select each of them in the auto layout and set their horizontal resizing to fill container. After that, come here, bring the today auto layout, merge the today auto layout with this auto layout here, and set the space between them to 0 also. Then select each of the items in that auto layout and set the horizontal resizing to fill container. Don't worry about this, this is just fine, right? Just select the auto layout and stretch it out again. And what do we have to do next? We need to create this section that says yesterday. Duplicate the today section and change this to yesterday. Then come here, select this, delete, select this, delete, and we have that. So now we can just merge the both of them into one auto layout, right? Set the space between to 0. Select this element or this item in the auto layout, horizontal resizing, fill container. Select this, set the horizontal resizing to fill container, and that's fine. Now let's come here, bring in recent activity now. It's time for us to merge everything with recent activity. And when that's merged into one auto layout, set the space between to 0. Select this child in the auto layout and set this to fill container. Select recent activities, set that to fill container. This is going to happen, not a problem. Just select the main auto layout and stretch. And I can rename this to recent activity. Right there we have that section created. Now I can just make this a component. Now if you look at the component we are redesigning, you can see that there is a stroke, right? There is a stroke around. Now we can choose to add that stroke if we want to, or we can choose to not add that stroke. Now if we want to add that stroke, I would come here, I would select the component and I would add a stroke property. Now when I add the stroke property, you may not see the stroke property yet. That's because the stroke property is inside, so I can set that outside. Now the stroke property is visible. I can also set the stroke color to, let's say, my dark outline color. Now we can change the corner radius value, or let's set the corner radius value to 16 and then set clip content, and there we have that. Now the next thing to create is this component here. Now this is a very easy component to create. So let's come here, let's create this text that says last 30 days. And that text would be making use of the heading text style. The color also of that text would be the primary text color. Now keep that text selected, put it in an auto layout and set the padding space in that auto layout to 0 on all sides. Right? You can call that auto layout last AL. Now the next thing to do is to create this container here, this blue container that will contain this icon. So I would come here, I would create a regular layout, and I would set the width of that regular layout to 64, and I would set the height to 64. After I do that, I would come here and I would set the corner radius to 8. When I set the corner radius to 8, I would come here and I would set the color for that layout to blue. And after I do that, I would bring in the icon that I would place there. So I would go to my assets library. I would bring in this icon here. Now this icon is way bigger than all of the icons I've been using so far. This icon is a 32 by 32 px icon. So please take note of that. I'll bring this in here, keep it at the absolute center of that layout, and change the color to white. And I would set constraints on that icon. I would make sure that icon is constrained to the center horizontally and the center vertically. Make sure the icon is also aligned properly to the center horizontally and the center vertically. So I can rename that to blue container or whatever you want to call it. Then the next thing I would create would be this text that says total subscribers. So let's create that text. It says total subscribers, right? I keep that text selected, and I would want us to use the big body text style. I would want us to use that, and I would want us to set the color style to primary text color. Keep that text selected, put it in its own auto layout, and set the padding on all sides to 0. Let's come here. Let's create this text here that displays the number of total subscribers, right? So that's 71,897. Keep that text selected. Go to my style library, and I'll be making use of the display text style for that. And when I set the display text style on this text, I would also change the color to primary text color, put it in an auto layout, set the padding on all sides to 0. And if I come back here, you'd see I have another thing to create. So I have this icon and this text here to create the text that says 122. So the way to do that is to come here, bring in the icon first. I think this is the icon here. Let's make the icon green, and let's create that text that says 122. So this text is going to be making use of my big body text style, of course, not the display text style. Keep it there, change its color also to green, merge the both of them into one auto layout, set the space between the both of them to 0, and I can bring this here now and merge this auto layout and this one into one auto layout. And when I merge the both of them into one auto layout, I would set the space between the both of them to 8. And after that, I would come here to my design, and you would see, or you would notice from the design, that this green icon and this text are sitting at the bottom line of this text that says 71,897, right? So, but if you come here in my design, you can see that they are actually sticking towards the top of the container, right? Towards the top of 71,897. Now, for me to fix that, I'll just come here and I would align everything in that auto layout to the bottom left, just like this. And here I have this. Now, I would want us to maybe reduce the space between from 8 to 4, and I think this is okay. So I would keep this here, and I'll merge all of this into one auto layout now. And I would set the space between the items in this auto layout to 0, just to have this. Now it will be time for me to merge all of this into one auto layout. Then set the space between the items in this auto layout to 12. And give it a white background color. Make sure everything in that auto layout is aligned to the vertical center and to the left horizontally. And that's fine. Now I would want us to keep this like this for now, and then create this link here that says view all. I would come here, I would say view all, and the view all text would be making use of the regular body text semi-bold text style. Let's make use of that. I would keep it selected, change the color of the text to blue, put it in an auto layout, and I would set the horizontal padding for that auto layout to 32. Set the vertical padding for the auto layout to 20. And when I increase the width of the auto layout, you'd see that the view all text stays at the center always, which is not how it is here. It's always aligned to the left. So I would come here, I would keep the auto layout selected, and I would align the item in that auto layout to the left, just like this. And that's okay. Now I would come here and I would set a background color for this auto layout, which is going to be my background color style, just like this. Now let's come here, let's select this, give it a horizontal padding of 32, and give it a vertical padding also of, let's try 32. 32 might look very okay. Okay, I think that's fine. Now let's come here, bring this close, merge the both of them into one auto layout, set the space between the items in that auto layout to 0. Select this item in the auto layout, set the horizontal resizing to fill container, select this item and set the horizontal resizing to fill container. Then let's stretch this horizontally to see what we have. And this looks okay. So let's come here, select this and give it a corner radius of 16, then clip content. Now, for us to make this mobile friendly, I would want us to set minimum width on this card or on this container so that the container would be unable to shrink below a certain point, right? Now, when the container shrinks to a certain point, it's going to stop shrinking. Then we will activate the wrapping property on its parent. So I would come here, I would set the minimum width for this container. Let's look at the width currently, it's 378. So I would want this container to squeeze to maybe this point. It can squeeze to this point. So this is 310 or 314. So let's give this container the luxury to shrink down to 314. So I'll set the minimum width to 314. Now, this container will be unable to shrink below 314. When it gets to 314, it's going to stop shrinking. So let's rename this container to stats. You can call that whatever you want to call it. And let's duplicate it. Now let's merge the three of them into one auto layout. Now let's set the space between these items in this auto layout to 16. Right? After we do that, select the individual items in the auto layout. Set the horizontal resizing to fill container. Fill container. Select this. Set the horizontal resizing to fill container. Now what I would want us to do is to rename this auto layout stats container, right? Keep the auto layout selected and activate wrapping on the auto layout by clicking on wrap here. Now you'd see that I'll be able to expand the width of the container and the containers inside the container would also expand. Now when I shrink the container to a certain level, the three containers would hit their minimum width values and they would wrap just like this, right? So we can use this for mobile and we can use this for tablet. Let's just bring last 30 days here, merge that with the start container, set the space between last 30 days and the start container to, let's say, 8. Let's zoom in and then select start container, set the horizontal resizing to fill container and just stretch this. Still mobile responsive, right? So we can work with this. So I would rename this auto layout to last 30 days. And now we have the three components redesigned. It will be time for us to merge them into one layout to create a dashboard. So at this point, I would come here. Don't forget to make this a component. I would select last 30 days and make it a component, right? So I would come here, I would bring in a desktop layout. Let's bring in desktop and let's add a layout grid on desktop. Set the grid property to columns. Set the count property for the columns to 12. Set the gutter property to a value of 16. And I would keep the margin set to 0. Now I would want my column grid color to be dark and not red. I would set that to something dark. I would close that. Now, what I would do next is to bring in the sidebar. Let's go to the asset library. Let's look for the sidebar. Bring this in and place this on the side. Now, I would make sure that my sidebar uses 3 columns. 1, 2, 3. I would stretch this to make sure it uses 3 columns. Then I would make sure this aligns to the bottom also. So let's preview this and you can see, yes, this looks okay. So let's go ahead to place the items that's supposed to be in the content area. So how do we do that? So I would come here, I would bring in a regular frame so that I can prep the content area spacing perfectly. Let's turn off the grid first. Now I'll bring in the regular frame, put it in the content area only. I would keep it selected, then come here and add a layout grid on just this new regular layout in the content area. Then I would set the grid type to a column grid, set the count property to 8, set the gutter property to 16, and I would still come here to change the color of the column grid to something dark. And what I would want to do here is just set the margin to, let's say, 20, right? So I'm setting the margin to 20, or let's set it to 24. I would set it to 24 so that I can use that as my spacing guide when I'm placing the element in the content area. Now, the content in the content area won't go outside of this column here on the left, and won't go outside of this column here on the right. That's going to help me with managing my spacing perfectly. So what do we bring in first? Let's bring in 30 days, last 30 days. Let's bring this in first. So let's come here. Let's place that there. Let's see how this looks. Okay. Now what I'll do is I'll select these to make the colors F7 or F8. Okay. Might be fair, you might just choose to do something better, right? You might choose to make yours better. Then I would come here, I would pick the other component, that's the recent activity, pick this, place it here, and I would turn on the grid, right, for this content area, and I would use that grid to have this placed perfectly, just like this. And now I'll turn off the grid for the content area. Let's see how it looks. Okay. Now the only thing that's off here is just these colors, right? Let's explore some color options there. So I think that's fine. Let's try to take out one of these cards and let's see what happens. Okay, I think having two cards there is even better. Let's set the color for this also to FD, and I think that's okay. Now let's try to adjust this text. I think the visual hierarchy between the total subscribers text and this can get better. So let's go to the parent component. Let's set the color on the total subscribers text to secondary color. Let's set this also to secondary color, and let's set this to secondary color. Then for the background color of the view all text, I think that's still too present. So let's use F7 for that. Let's see how it turns out. Okay, this doesn't look bad. Now we can bring this component down a bit and bring this also down a bit, like this. And we can preview this to see what we have. We have just created this dashboard layout by redesigning 3 components from the Tailwind UI library. So you can go ahead to do this and even design more components from the Tailwind UI library. So thank you all, and thank you all.